Now, I'm going to continue to unpack this a little bit, and I want to make a further distinction because I think there are two different kinds of narratives. There's one kind of narrative which is an opportunity-based narrative. The driving forces around an opportunity that's out there for us to harness, to capture, to enjoy. There's a different kind of narrative which is a threat-based narrative. The motivation is we are under threat. We're under attack. We have to come together. The future is yet to be determined, but it's all about that threat. And are we going to respond in time and in the right way to deal with that threat? Now, I'd like to just suggest that one of the reasons we have such a dysfunctional political society in America today, and you may disagree with that assessment, but that's my assessment, is because on both sides of the aisle, we have fallen back to threat-based narratives. If you're a Republican, the threat is all about those terrorists out there who are coming to get us. And if it's not those terrorists out there, it's those secularists here at home who are here to undermine all our family values that we hold so precious. We're under threat, we're under attack. If you're a Democrat, it's a different set of threats. The threats is those polluters that are destroying our environment. We're facing environmental catastrophe. The world is collapsing around us. And those evil people on Wall Street, threatening all our jobs, all our job security, creating increasing income inequality. This is a huge threat to our society. We need to mobilize. But both sides, threat, threat, threat. Where's the opportunity? Where's the opportunity-based narratives? The reason I put such an emphasis on opportunity-based narratives versus threat-based narratives is I think that opportunity-based narratives help us to overcome those cognitive biases that I mentioned earlier in terms of mounting pressure. If you have a compelling opportunity-based narrative, first of all, you tend to magnify the perception of reward. There's a huge, exciting reward out there. And yeah, there are some risks along the way, but it's worth it. That reward is so amazing. And because that reward is so awesome, it's going to take some time to achieve it. But it's worth it. Focus on the horizon. Focus on the opportunity. It's coming. And it tends to cultivate a positive sum mindset. It is about us coming together and creating something much greater than we could on our own, individually. If we collaborate, we have much more to share together. Very different mindset than that zero sum. It's a fixed set of resources. You get it or I get it, but that's the only way it can happen. Now, I mentioned narratives can and do tend to emerge at different levels, at various levels. And I've come to believe through personal experience that personal narratives are central to who we are and how we act. I talked earlier about mounting pressure in our society. I just want to tell you a personal story about mounting pressure, which is my childhood. I came under extreme pressure. I had emotionally abusive and absent parents. And it was combined with an experience of moving to a different country every year of my childhood. So when we tend to have dysfunctional, abusive, nuclear families, one of our compensation mechanisms is to reach out to extended family or friends that can sustain you through that experience. I faced the challenge of going into a new school every year in the knowledge that at the end of the year, I was going to have to give up all the friends that I had. So, mounting pressure. I lived it. I lived in fear, and I felt extremely isolated. But I survived by evolving a personal narrative. The narrative that I developed, and I would never have articulated it in these words when I was a young kid, but in reflection, I think I can capture it, which is, I am here to serve you by developing the potential of my mind and sharing my ideas through writing. That was my narrative. That's why I was here. That's the kind of impact I could have. And the personal narrative did some really interesting things for me. One was, it allowed me to escape emotions. Emotions were very scary things as a child, because I was confronted with negative emotions all the time. I could escape into the world of the mind, reason, avoid those emotions. I could hopefully, although not to be achieved, win the love of my parents, because both of my parents respected the intellect and academic achievement. So it was a personal narrative that fit very nicely into what I hoped would win their love and connection. And by focusing on helping others, it was all about helping others, I could avoid sharing any of my own vulnerability. I'd be the strong one, the reliable one, the dependable one. I wouldn't ever have to be vulnerable. And I could use writing as a way to reduce face-to-face interaction. I didn't have to connect face-to-face with anybody. I could sit alone, write, send it out, and still connect with others, but through writing rather than face-to-face, because face-to-face was so scary as a child. Now, it's interesting to me in reflection that the narrative that I evolved to survive, and in some respects thrive during that very difficult childhood, was an opportunity-based narrative. It could have been a threat-based narrative, but I ended up evolving an opportunity one. There was opportunity out there to help others through writing, through the mind. And it kept me going, motivated me. But over time, I've evolved a new narrative. I've realized over time that this narrative that had helped me so much as a child was limiting my potential for growth and development. So over time, I've begun evolving a new narrative. I don't think it's quite there yet, but it takes the form of, I need your help in framing and answering really exciting questions that could unlock potential and possibility for everyone. Really energizing. It helps me to overcome a lot of my deep introversion and shyness and connect with others in a rich and nourishing way, and build a very rich network of relationships, personal relationships, that stimulate and support me over time. This new personal narrative helps me to express vulnerability. I need help. It's not about me helping you. I need help. I don't have the answers. Something that I viewed previously as very dangerous and something that should be avoided at all costs, vulnerability. But by expressing vulnerability, I find it helps me build trust and build deeper, more satisfying relationships with people. It gives me a foundation to express emotions. In an environment of trust, I'm more able and willing to share and express emotions. It helps me to journey beyond my comfort zone, to lots of different kinds of edges. Where all the interesting questions are, they're out on the edge. They're not in the core. The edges are the exciting places. And you don't need to have all the answers. All you got to do is have the questions. That's where the excitement is the questions. So, at a very personal level, I think narrative has played a very significant role in shaping my life experiences, and it's again one of the factors that's driven me to pay more attention to narrative at many different levels in many different contexts. But I want to pull back to this question of, so why are narratives so important? I talked earlier about this notion of overcoming these cognitive biases that can become very dysfunctional in our institutions and society. And they help to change behavior. You're more likely to act boldly and take risks with an opportunity-based narrative. You're more likely to invest for the long term rather than just focus on short-term returns. And you're much more likely to work collaboratively for shared goals. I think narratives also play another role, which is very important, and stories don't quite do it, at least again the way I'm defining them, is that they provide a form of stability in an arena of increasing instability. Narratives are something you can hold on to, that typically aren't going to change, or at least change very radically and very unexpectedly. They're a compass that we all need and crave in a time of growing uncertainty and extreme events. Narratives also play an important role in focusing on what's important. In a time when we're overwhelmed with sensory inputs and impact, what's really important? What's a filter that can help us to figure out where to spend our time, where to devote our attention? Help us to cope with that attention overload that we're all suffering with. And in that context, I want to make another distinction, because I think there's an interesting distinction between what I call the narrative of the true believer versus the narrative of the explorer. So the narrative of the true believer, and this is, I think, oversimplification, but characteristic of a lot of religious narratives, is there is a destination out there. It's very specific. We can describe it in great detail. And there's a very specific path that we need to go along to get to that destination. You have to believe. You have to accept this is the path and that's the destination. Narrative of the explorer is very different. There's an area of opportunity out there. Not quite sure where and how it's going to manifest and evolve, but it's a huge opportunity. And in very broad form, we can describe some of the elements of it, but it's up to us through our actions and all the actions that are going to be hard to predict in terms of how and where they come together, but to manifest that opportunity. Very different kind of narrative from the narrative of the true believer. I personally believe that one of the key elements in a rapidly changing environment is the openness that is created by the narrative of the explorer. That willingness to embrace diversity, celebrate it, and highlight the value of collaboration in unexpected ways through this challenging time. Narratives are also important because it touches on another topic that I've spent an increasing amount of time on, which is they catalyze, nurture, and amplify passion. And here specifically I'm talking about the passion of the explorer, what I call the passion of the explorer, which is all about a sustained commitment to a particular domain and to making an increasing difference in that domain. It's not just I want to study it, I'm curious about it, I want to learn about it. It's I need to learn in order to make a difference. But the measure of success is have I made a difference and am I increasing my impact over time? That's the passion of the explorer. And it has two different components to it, which again I think narratives tend to reinforce. One is what I call a questing disposition, which is what is your reaction and natural orientation when confronted with an unexpected challenge. Many of us who are not passionate about what we're doing treat those unexpected challenges as a horrible nuisance. Our first reaction is to try to ignore them, hope they go away. If they don't go away, we try to paper them over and hide them. If that doesn't work, we'll kludge our way through, but our key goal is to get back to our assigned work, our assigned task. A questing disposition has a completely different reaction. Wow, that's interesting. I never saw that challenge before. How would I tackle that? How would I do that? This is exciting. This is an opportunity to get myself to the next level. Very different kind of orientation. And narratives, opportunity-based narratives, I think, cultivate and amplify that kind of questing disposition. Because the quest makes sense in this broader opportunity horizon.